Hello and welcome to the World Crypto Network, here again live from Mises University. Today we're going to read about the fantastic book, Against Intellectual Property by Stephan Kinsella. I'm going to read from the chapter on scarcity and ideas. Like the magically reproducible lawnmower, ideas are not scarce. If I invent a technique for harvesting cotton, your harvesting cotton in this way would not take away the technique from me. I still have my technique, as well as my cotton. Your use of the technique does not exclude my use. We could both use my technique to harvest cotton. There is no economic scarcity and no possibility of conflict over the use of a scarce good. Thus, there is no need for exclusivity, and thus there are no needs for property rights. So thank you again for joining us here at another live stream. We had the most amazing live stream this morning with the one and only Saifedean Ammous. And on that live stream, we also had Nico from Maximum Liberty live on, and he's going to join us today to talk about open source entrepreneurship, because it's all about the non-scarcity of ideas and that they should be shared freely. So Nico, who are you? Tell the people a bit about you, and then what are your first thoughts on open source entrepreneurship?
Hey Max, thanks again for inviting me, and hey everybody, my name is Nico. I'm the chairman of Finnish Cryptocurrency Association, and I'm an open source entrepreneur. I'm a member of several projects, and also we are doing some projects with Max. It's an awesome way to get together with like-minded people. We are all voluntarists. We are there for our free will, and we have the common goals that we work towards. And it kind of things might move a little bit slower than in a hierarchical classic system at first, but I think we have a much more resilient and long-term plan that will pay out in the long term. So what we're talking about is a starfish organization in opposed to a spider organization where we don't have a head, we don't have a hierarchy, that a CEO that can be thrown into jail and then the whole project dies. That's the basic idea, so that it will be resilient, it can't be attacked that easily. If we have the sound ideology behind the projects and we are doing something to contribute, make the world a better place. And we've been growing organically only. We don't do advertising. We just try to do the best possible projects we can, and that way, that's our way to contribute to the world. That's my first thoughts anyway.
Absolutely. One of the most important attributes of Bitcoin is that we do not have a central point of failure, right? We are decentralized in every shape or form. Yes, we have a founder called Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that was. By the way, I think he was at Mises University in 2008, just before he launched a white paper. But the best thing that Satoshi Nakamoto did was get away from Bitcoin. The best thing that he did was to disappear. The second best thing was to invent Bitcoin. But he could only invent Bitcoin if he would have disappeared. And that's exactly what he did. Because only if we do not have a central point of failure where the government can come in, kick in the doors, and try to destroy it, only then are we resilient, are we censorship resistant. And that is incredibly, incredibly important. And what we have is not the spider, not the thing that is a central point with hub and spokes out of there, but actually decentralized, a starfish. And there's a great book on this called The Starfish and the Spider. And what it basically teaches is that a decentralized, completely decentralized organization can, in its actions, even if it is divided and split up into two groups, out of one starfish, two starfish arise. And therefore, if you try to destroy a anti-fragile system, it is going to get resilient and even more stronger. And we have seen that with, for example, Bitcoin Cash. We've had one Bitcoin, there was a disagreement, there was an attack on the Bitcoin consensus rules, right? They tried to change them without our permission. So we split off. We now are two starfish, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. One is the kind of better one, right? And the other one is the ones with the crazy nuts. But anyhow, those are the most important aspects of Bitcoin. It's censorship resistant, and that by definition comes from its decentralization. So, Nico, what are your basic thoughts on the attributes of decentralization? Where do we have them? In what fields do we have them? And especially on the technology and on the information side.
Well, I think decentralization, especially when it comes to sensitive information, is super important, of course. And we have in our projects, we are currently tackling many problems, especially decentralized data storage. You should be able to own your own data when you use these services. And one reason why we are using Bitcoin actually in our project rather than creating our own tokens is because of the decentralized nature of the chain and the security of the chain. So I think that's an interesting angle and something fresh we can bring to the scene, that we are actually working with Bitcoin for the most parts, at least as long as it's feasible. And while we don't necessarily have all the solutions we need for a finished products, that certainly is the end goal. Like there's plenty of sidechain solutions, like Liquid is really interesting. Rootstock is another interesting thing, smart contracts for Bitcoin, stuff like that. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about all the projects that we're doing together as well.
I absolutely agree. And HD Grex asks in the chat, what do you think are the negative aspects of decentralization? That is also really important. And I would argue that a decentralized system is on some levels less efficient. It is more inefficient because more people have to verify for themselves. More people are independent and maybe not as coordinated as a system that is centralized, that is being controlled. Because in a centralized and a controlled system, you can force the people to do what the centralized party wants them to do. And this means, for example, if you say, hey, everybody, let's walk out of this house right now, I force you to do that, the people will leave the house much sooner, as if you say, well, you can leave whenever you want. And that is, I would say, one disadvantage, that you somehow are less efficient. And on the Bitcoin side, Bitcoin is on the technical level so decentralized, on the network level, on a network and the information technology level, is so decentralized that it is much more costly to do a Bitcoin transaction than to do a transaction with, with, for example, PayPal. Now, we had Saifedean on. He said that PayPal and Bitcoin are not comparable, and he's absolutely true. Because Bitcoin is cash and PayPal is just a medium of exchange, just the transaction layer, not the settlement layer. But further, Bitcoin is decentralized, PayPal is centralized, and a centralized database will always be more efficient than a decentralized database. But Nico, what are your thoughts? What might be weaknesses of a decentralized organization?
Well, the obvious one is what Bitcoin often gets a bad rep for is the lack of direction or execution of certain decision making. I guess this kind of like governance model is a little bit sticky, which in my opinion it should be when we are building a fundamental resilient protocol. However, when it comes to startups and companies, it might be that especially if the field is highly competitive, that there's some disadvantages in moving forward with a decentralized model, because there's not really like a tough ass CEO to push things forward necessarily. It's more like a lead by example kind of thing, and everybody just picks up the slack wherever it's needed. So it could be it will most certainly be less efficient, like you said. Like centralized systems are always more efficient, and there should be a place for those as well. But I think we can go for something like a little bit of a mix of both. Like, for example, what we are doing with our blockchain development company, Blockfish. What we're trying to do is create a collective of individual operators that can be companies that can have their own hierarchical model, or whatever the model is. The point is that the connection point is decentralized, and everybody can join and work through this collective. So maybe some kind of a mix and match thing could work there. But apart from that, I would always say that while decentralization is not needed always, then for those parts that it is, for example, decentralization of leadership, I think that has a huge motivational factor. And I think that outweighs a lot of the negative parts. And sorry, I can't think of many negative things about decentralization. I'm big fan.
I agree. There's actually not too much that is bad with decentralization, right? Because after all, you give power to the individual. You take away power from the centralized controller and you give it to the individual user, consumer, whatever it is. and you let them handle their own things, and they are the owner, the owners over their own money. In Bitcoin, if you run a full node, if you're a first-class Bitcoin citizen, if you want to say it like that, then you are completely sovereign. Nobody is telling you anything. You don't have to trust anyone. You verify each and everything. And that is amazing. That is an attribute that we should strive for. And it's amazing. We really need more of that. But also what is really important is the open source code of Bitcoin. And this, again, strives back to what I just read of you out of the amazing book Against Intellectual Property, that property rights do not apply for ideas. Nobody owns an idea. An idea should be spread. An idea should be given out to as many people as possible, because there is no conflict of ownership. And not Rothbard, not Murray Rothbard, but Ludwig von Mises wrote exhaustively, Rothbard also, but Mises especially, about the power of ideas, and that if we share them, the idea doesn't diminish in value, but on the contrary, it increases in value. And the more people are in a network, and especially a network of information, the more people work on it, and the more the idea is actually worth it. So Nico, what do you think are the advantages of Bitcoin being open source on a technological software side?
Oh, the advantages are immense. Like I could probably talk hours about that, but I'll just start from the obvious part, which is that the trustlessness, or rather that you can trust in mathematics and you can trust in an open source code, because I'll be upfront. I'm not a super technical person. I'm a generalist. I understand Bitcoin in general, and I'm an engineer, so I understand logic, but I can still trust the code because it's open source, and I can trust the game theory plays out because there's going to be smart people who are going to curate the code and make sure that it's running smoothly. And then once you establish trust in this collective development company, and then the code becomes kind of like trustless. Of course, you do have to trust the developers. Actually, there's a question from the chat. Joe Ray is asking to explain what RSK, so rootstock, is. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to give a brief explanation on that. I'm not a super technical person, but I would be happy to answer that. So the idea is that it's a sidechain solution for smart contracts. So once you move from the main chain to the side chain, and then you do the smart contract park, let's say it's an escrow, for example, like a transaction with two people. And then once it's executed, it will free the Bitcoins in the main chain, and then it will be the transaction will be finalized in the main chain. So that's my basic understanding of it, and I'm sure somebody more technical can give a better one.
Yeah, rootstock is really interesting, and I think the most interesting part about it is the sidechain project, because you can now try something out. You can now try massive changes to the Bitcoin consensus rules. For example, the scripting language, as Rootstock does. But you don't have to do it on chain and force everybody else to use it. But you create a separate network that is again completely voluntary and opt in rather than opt out. So people have to actively use it before they are involved and affected by the effects of that consensus change. So that I love. Anarchy and money, competition, perfect, beautiful. What I do not like about the smart contracts that Rootstock proposes is that they are Turing complete. And yes, that is what Ethereum has. But Bitcoin, this is not a bug. This is a feature that Bitcoin is not Turing complete. That Bitcoin is limited in its scripting language. Bitcoin is still exhaustive in its scripting language. You can do a bunch of incredible cool stuff in Bitcoin. Multi-sigs and lock type, two of the most simple functions that are amazing already. But if you want to do a ERC20 shitcoin token, you can do that on Bitcoin. It's called colored coins. It's super, super simple. So all that stuff that people think that only Ethereum can be done in Bitcoin. Bitcoin has smart contracts. It's called Bitcoin script. What they do not have is Turing completeness. And Turing completeness basically means that you can express any problem that you want in the code of the network. You just have to have enough resources. So basically, theoretically, you could run a operating system just on the Ethereum network if you pay enough for the fees. Well, it's of course not useful and not necessary, so nobody is going to do it, but theoretically it's possible. And because there is an unlimited amount of possibilities of what you are going to do, with that code, there's also an infinite amount of bugs that you can have in the code. And if we compare the amount of Ethereum that has been stolen, not by stupid people losing their private key, but by actual consensus failures, and we compare that to Bitcoin, it's huge. It's huge. Ethereum is so much more insecure than Bitcoin. It has bugs all the time, parity hack, the DAO. I mean, look at all that. It was horrible. That stuff does not happen in Bitcoin. Why? Because it is not Turing complete, because it is secure. That is the important aspect of Bitcoin. Not cheap smart contracts, but security. So, Nico, but because we have an open source system, as I said, we have competition. So what are your thoughts on competition in money? And does the competition mainly come because Bitcoin is open source?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if open sourceness has anything to do with that. Maybe it inspires people more, and people can fork off and roll their own Bitcoin, which is great. I find it awesome because it's like it works as a test bed for Bitcoin. And I like to say that Bitcoin doesn't have competition at the moment. I do truly believe that. That's my opinion. And the reason is that that's the only secure chain. However, this can change, and the competition for this is great because it keeps also Bitcoin nimble, and we gotta keep developing and making it better. And if it is so that it can't answer all the challenges put forward, and there's another option that will be better suited in the future, then of course we should go with that. It's only logical. But yeah, the competition, I think like there's also a nice comparison. I don't remember who said that, but it's like about casino games. Like there's multiple casino games. There's just not one casino game, right? There's never going to be just one coin. Well, I mean, technically, I believe that within a certain amount of time, maybe 10 years or something, there will be like Bitcoin will cover 95% of all the use cases of all the possible shitcoins. However, there will still be these shitcoins. There will be Amazon coin, there will be Facebook coin probably, or whatever Fed coin. And these all serve some kind of a function. Let's call them casino games, a way to accumulate more Bitcoin. I certainly see that as a viable use case for them.
Exactly. We now have anarchy in money. I write my bachelor thesis on that, towardsliberty.com/anarchy, right? And the beautiful thing here is that we have competition. Within 5 clicks in a browser at forkgen.lol or forkgen.tech, you can get your own Bitcoin clone. And it works. It works. 5 clicks with a mouse. You don't even have to know any coding for that. And you have the code base for running a own Bitcoin cryptocurrency. And that is amazing, because that means that many, many smart people and many, many dumb people will go out there and do their own. If the dumb people do it, they're not going to have a good currency. They're going to have a shitty currency. And a shitty currency is in a free market not going to survive. For example, let's say copper. Copper is a shitty monetary metal. It is worse than gold or silver as a money. Therefore, it is not being used. And that's why copper doesn't have any monetary value, any value that arises out of its monetary use. It has other value, of course. It is a super useful metal, but it is not a monetary metal. And the same will apply to Bitcoin. We will have thousands, and we already have thousands of different alternatives that users, you as an individual, can run and can use as your money. But the question is, will others? And others will only use it if it is a useful money. So in a free market with basically endless competition, you will always, by definition, have a currency being the most prevalent, that is the most useful, the most saleable medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account. So what do you think, Nico? Is Bitcoin that one currency that is the currency that is most prevalently used in this open and in this free market, and why?
Well, for now, like I said, I don't find it has any realistic competition. It can change, of course. But the main thing is like the network effects. You know, if you look at the telephone, it was hard to create an alternative messaging protocol at that time after the network effects caught on and enough people were using them already. So I think the same thing is starting to happen to Bitcoin. I think the most realistic time for any kind of like killing of Bitcoin to happen was maybe around 2013 or something like. Well, when was the Mt. Gox? I forgot the actual time. Anyway, around that time probably was the best bet to try and kill Bitcoin. Luckily, it was probably flying under the radar at that time. and it survived. Now, however, I think there's the network effects start to be too big. The new developers coming into the scene probably want to learn from the best, and I do believe that while Bitcoin might not have the most of the devs, I think it applies here like quality over quantity. And I think the best devs will want to learn from the best, and I think that will accumulate the network effects of Bitcoin, make it more resilient, make it more useful in the future. And of course, people keep buying the best one, and Bitcoin dominance has been going up. Actually, I just checked; it was like 45% or something, and I think it's gonna keep ticking up again. And it might be that the altcoin winter is permanent. I don't know if they're ever gonna come back in the way they did last year. It could, of course. You're muted.
Yeah, I should unmute myself. Absolutely. And one other beautiful thing about Bitcoin, and especially about open source, which is the main topic of today, is black swan events. Because anyone and anything can innovate. Nobody has to ask for permission. If you have something useful, if you have something that is better than Bitcoin, do it. Just put it out there and people will use it. And because anyone can innovate, and anyone, and doesn't even have to ask anyone if he can, many, many cool things happen. And one perfect example for this is the creation of Mimblewimble. It was proposed on in a cool story, and I'm just going to read the abstract of this thing, of the white paper that Andrew Poelstra, Bitcoin core developer, and he has put that out. He's kind of overtaken that project because the creator is such a crazy guy. So check this out. Abstract of the Mimblewimble white paper. At about 4:30 United UTC time zone, on the morning of August 2nd, 2016, an anonymous person using the name Tom Elvis Redusor signed onto the Bitcoin Research IRC channel, dropped a document hosted on a Tor hidden service, Jet16, then signed out. Didn't leave any other message. The document, titled Mimblewimble, described a blockchain with a radically different approach to transactions constructing from Bitcoin, supporting non-interactive merging and cut-through of transactions, confidential transaction, and full verification of the current chain state without requiring new users to verify the history of any coin. So that is basically what happened, and this is the definition of a black swan event. There are some researchers hanging out on the IRC channel, minding their own business, doing their own work, right? All of a sudden, random account named after a Harry Potter character drops into the network. He drops a link, leaves. We never hear from him again. We open that link. Turns out this is a mind-blowing innovation in the field of cryptography. It combines many of the newest technologies, adds a few new innovations themselves, and actually makes a working product out of it. This is amazing. And if you work, for example, in an institution, in a bank, in a government, this would not be possible. If you would just cold drop a document like this at the president of the company, he would not even read it. But because anyone can innovate, and because anyone can do that, people do it, and amazing stuff comes out. So Nico, what do you think are other black swan events, or the power of black swan events in general?
Well, I don't know if I have any explanations to give on those, but from the like open source company perspective, I think there's tremendous power in letting people just take your work, take your work and make it better, and not try to hoard information. So I think that's the main takeaway from decentralized organizations. Like the age of hoarding information is probably behind us mostly. And I think in the future, it will be much, much more productive to share information and just let people run with it. And while that might not make you rich in the short term, it will certainly make you rich in the long term and very slowly. But yeah, you can talk more about the black swan events, because I'm not the matter expert there.
Well, you bring up the point of companies actually using the permissionless innovation to get forward. And absolutely, I 100% agree. We see that institutionalized companies cannot innovate. They do not. If they reach a certain size, they turn basically into a socialistic state that controls all the assets and tries to allocate them. But the thing is, a company, a big company that is hierarchically organized, just like a nationalistic state, is the sole owner of all the assets. And because then only one person or one entity controls all those assets, they cannot exchange it with someone else, right? Inside the company. They can, of course, exchange it with other companies and consumers, but I'm talking about inside the companies. And therefore, because they cannot exchange it, there are no prices. And this means that a company, by definition, and especially a large company, and because they do not have prices, they cannot allocate their resources. They cannot make sure that the stuff that they have, that they allocate it into a useful goal. And therefore you see time and time again that big institutions just kind of stale. They do not really innovate. They do not move forward because they don't have any prices. They don't know what to do. That is a problem that Mises, Rothbard's teacher, said is the calculation problem in socialism. Economic calculation in socialism is not possible. Why? Because we don't have exchange. And out of exchange, prices arise. And out of prices, we can know where we should allocate our goods. And that's why we see time and time again that big companies like Microsoft, like GE, like IBM, fail because they cannot innovate, because they have no idea what they're doing. So, Nico, I mean, yes, the prices are one thing, but where do you think are other factors where institutionalized companies, hierarchically organized companies fail?
Well, like you said, they fail in innovation because things don't. I've worked for several big corporations back in the day when I was still in construction, and it's pretty bad because you can't really, if you're forward thinking and you want to innovate, it's really difficult to get your voice heard because the information tends to only flow from the top down. So that's an obvious shortcoming of a spider organization, and they tend to get complacent. They tend to get comfortable with the position, especially after some success. And from my country, Nokia is a great example of what happened to them, and their hubris kind of killed the whole idea because they were not willing to adapt and take from others and try to stay alive with the past kind of like this success, and didn't see it coming. And I guess that was kind of like a black swan event as well for Nokia, and from going from like the global leader of making cell phones to like barely making them, and now they went back to making these like super basic handsets that still sell well in the developing countries. It kind of makes you think like, what could have they done differently? And for sure there was a lot of hot air, and maybe it was a kind of a bubble, but I think it would have been fixable with a different kind of organization model. Maybe split it down to a little bit. They used to have something called my sister's husband actually used to work on this project called what was it called? Migo, maybe.
Eagle.
And they could have run with that. Nokia, I mean, they could have run with that, and they could have separated to another decentralized part of Nokia, for example, to develop it and then try to compete with Apple. But they didn't do that. They shut it down, and that's basically how you kill good ideas and innovation. And what decentralized organization does is completely different. It will not shoot down any ideas. It will listen to each and every idea, and if there's enough legs for these ideas, then part of the team can just go and do that. And maybe there's new members to the team that come organically. It's like, hey, what a neat idea! I want to work on that. That's what's going on with NX and WeEconomy, at least. Like we've been getting like what we started. It was just mostly generalists and maybe some economy guys. And then now we have like developers and people are really coming into the ideology. So that's like super strong because we didn't really advertise at all. So I like to use that as a case example. I mean, it's not like we're super huge or anything like that, but I think this is a way to build a long-term product for sure.
Exactly, yes. So NX Solar was one project that I started after I wrote the first part of my bachelor thesis on project finance with Bitcoin and initial coin offerings, and just using this technology to finance projects. I wrote the theoretical part, of course, under the open source Creative Commons license, And then I thought, like, okay, this is a good idea. I should actually try to do this. How am I going to do this? Am I going to incorporate and get employees and pay them and you know, tell them what to do? I was like, no, this is not Bitcoin. This is not the new ideal. So the new ideal for me was to open source it, to make it as decentralized as possible. So yes, I kind of founded the project, but I'm definitely not the CEO, the boss, or anything. We are just a group of people coming together to write code, to work on code. We are people sitting together in a circle talking, basically. This is freedom of speech, right? Code is speech. And we try to make a beautiful poem. But the poem is just not in words, it is in cryptography, right? It is in code. And it is amazing that you can see how cool that the, you know, how cool the effort and the compassion of the contributors are. Because they are not incentivized per se by money, although yes, this is important, and of course we want to get paid, we want to make a profit. You can make a profit with an open source company. That's absolutely doable. But nevertheless, if you find people that come to your company not in order to get paid, but because they like the project and they want to support the project and they want to increase the project in prosperity and make sure that the world sees that project because they believe in it, then they are in it with their heart. And that is something that money cannot buy. You can pay your employees millions and millions of Bitcoin every single hour. If they don't like your project, if they cannot support it from their heart, they're not going to be there full 100%. And so the voluntary argument to say that people should always come to you voluntarily, as of course Austrian economic teaches you, natural law teaches you, also applies for companies. And that's why I'm such a big fan of open source entrepreneurship, because by definition, it is voluntary. And people come together on a voluntary basis in order to interact with each other. So Nico, maybe just expand a little on just what you personally experienced, the beauty of open source in organizations, of being an open source entrepreneur.
Well, I guess it all started when I founded my own company, Omnifin, back in 2013. Back then, it was just a construction engineering consultancy, and I do that as a hobby now. Much more interesting to be 100% on crypto and Bitcoin, and all these cool projects that we are now building to try to make it mainstream and try to make the world a better place from. In terms of like energy creation and actually using Bitcoin, which has been a topic covered in many, and the concern of a lot of people, how to get Bitcoin to mainstream. We're working on that with WeEconomy, and my experience is like it's awesome. Like since the first time I joined NX Solar, that was like about a year ago, I think. It was just from a Telegram group. A friend. Our mutual friend kind of connected us, and we talked. Like I just jumped right into these video meetings, and we started chatting. And also, by the way, at this point, I would like to say that we are doing this kind of like a virtual board meeting thing, where all our meetings are public and everybody is welcome to join. And then in terms of like transparency, like we put everything is on YouTube, and we're trying to do that. Once we actually found the company, we intend to keep that up as well. But yeah, the first thing was like, this is something that I'd never experienced before, coming from construction background, from like I used to work for Skanska, which I believe it used to be the 4th largest construction company in the world, and things like it's to time stand still there. And when I came to work with these guys, it was like instantly, like I was hooked. There's no turning back. There's no way I'm ever going to go work for anybody anymore that I don't want to. And I really, really wanted to work with these guys. And I felt the same way, where they really, really wanted to. Everybody was putting in the work. Everybody was throwing in ideas, and it was really intoxicating for me. And that was my first experience. I'm not ever going to go back. Like I don't see any reason. I think this is the future.
Yeah. Once you try it, you're hooked, right? And the beautiful thing is, though, that you can leave at any time. Nobody is stopping you from exiting. If I would want to walk away from the project, I would. And you know, if I don't have time working on it, well, then I don't. And if I have some other project that I would want to support much more, that maybe fits my ideas even better, I would do that. But that's okay. because I'm a free human being. I can choose on what I want to work on, and I can work on several different projects at the same time. The idea of only working for one company on one project is still from the Industrial Revolution, because back then we did not have the power of open source software and open source non-scarce networks such as the internet. But we have this now, and we can support several different projects. For example, I'm supporting the Mises Institute by being right here, right now, right? This is what I count as part of my open source entrepreneurship, talking about that stuff. I can, of course, work on Bitcoin, spreading the word of Bitcoin. And I, of course, do that. I can work on NX Solar and Blockfish, the more project finance stuff on NX, and then the development stuff on Blockfish. I also have a consulting firm where I consult small to medium-sized businesses. I can do that as well. But, of course, I'm here on the World Crypto Network right now. So I also support this open source project. And that's why I'm such a big fan of the World Crypto Network, is that it is open source. People can join anytime. People can leave anytime. And that is beautiful. All the persons that provide content here do it voluntarily. And they, right now, are not getting paid for it. I'm not getting paid for it. And maybe, I could provide my bills and get paid for it. Yes, maybe I could. But I don't want to. Why? Because I want to provide this content for free. I want to provide it to as many people as possible and as open as possible. And that is something that is especially useful in a open source company, that you can walk away. So it is complete anarchy. So Nico, would you maybe talk a little bit more about anarchy in open source companies and what that actually means?
Well, anarchy is often misunderstood, especially or misconstrued by the mainstream media as vandalism, more or less. But what it actually means is being leaderless. Or at least for me, that's what it means. Like, it doesn't mean that everything is chaotic. Well, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is hard to get a meeting or get everybody on a video call and stuff like that. It can be chaotic, but it's not really a bother. It's okay. Like, everybody is so relaxed on it, and nothing. We may have some deadlines, but nothing is too serious. And I think the anarchy part is mostly the leaderless way of doing things. So we lead by example. So you do something awesome, you throw in some idea, you inspire people, and that's like I always like you mentioned the book Starfish and the Spider. There's a great case example of how the Apache Indians fought the conquistadors a long time ago. And they had these leaders, Nantans, and the Spanish thought that by killing the leaders, they will simply just they will yield like the others so far, hierarchical systems. But what they didn't realize is that the Nantans were just part of the decentralized tribe, and they were leading by example, and people were following them because they wanted to follow them, not because they decided, hey, now I'm the boss, I'm the strongest, and you guys gotta follow me. And this is how normally leaders lead in a traditional system. What they did, they were leading the people in charge, and then once they were killed, another Nantan would raise up, and then they would scatter and decentralize further, and they could never beat them. And I think that's a great metaphor for actually Bitcoin. I think the book was released like maybe 1 or 2 years before Bitcoin, but it pretty much tells Bitcoin is the perfect case example of a decentralized Starfish organization.
It really is. People talk about, wow, now with Bitcoin, we can have decentralized autonomous organizations. Yeah, we can. Now it's possible. But I think the best example of a decentralized autonomous organization is Bitcoin. That's what it is. A bunch of individuals coming together in a decentralized fashion to create an autonomous organization that is not controlled by one individual, but is completely autonomous in the rules that were set in stone early, before Bitcoin started. And that means that Bitcoin itself is a DAO. Bitcoin itself is this thing of the internet, this collective. But it's a collective that is not higher than the individual, because the individual can always enter, use, and exit the system without any censorship, without any resistance of the network itself. Nobody can stop you from entering Bitcoin. Nobody can stop you from using Bitcoin. But most importantly, nobody can stop you from walking the fuck away. Because if you no longer want to use Bitcoin, don't use it. If you want to use Bcash, Bitcoin Cash, use it. If you want to support Ethereum, do it. If you want to go to Dash, do it. But the beautiful thing is, if you want to stay in Bitcoin, you stay in Bitcoin. And nobody can stop you from doing that. Nobody can stop you from actually using Bitcoin. And that is super amazing and nice. And that is the first time that this ever happened. Because gold actually pretty much is censorable. Because gold is almost never used in barter exchange, like in direct exchange for one gold coin versus the good. No, because gold is not a useful medium of exchange. It's heavy, it's hard to carry, it's not easily divisible. So most of the time you use paper currency, a money certificate. But as soon as you put your gold coin into a bank vault, the bank controls the gold, and you give up your ownership over that gold. And that means that it is censorable, that they can deny you access to. And so therefore, you know, it's just super difficult to build a system that is decentralized, that is a starfish, that does not give up, that is relentless, and that is not being controlled by anyone other than the individuals using it. And that is the beauty of Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing that Satoshi did was to walk away. And that's precisely what should happen for every coin that tries to compete. There can't be a father figure. There can't be like, do you remember what happened to Ethereum price last year when there was this fake news that he had been killed by a car crash? I think it went down like 40% or something. That's pretty unsettling to me. Like if I was a holder, that would definitely put some worry in my mind. But you don't have that kind of a worry with Bitcoin, and that's why it's so super hard to replicate, like you said. But where you can use decentralization is making your organizations like that. If we go back to the topic at hand, like if you want to start a company or you want to start doing something, you don't even need to have a company. You can just organize a Telegram group, or you can start making YouTube videos and have people join you in. And then that's actually pretty much what's been going on here with me and Max lately. And you just have to start doing things, and people will join in. If what you have to say resonates with people, like great. And if not, if you don't get followers, then great also. You know what, you can do something else. You know, there's so many options. And this is, I feel like people are preparing for the world that has died like 20 years ago, which is astonishing to me. Like what is taught in universities, what is taught in schools, primary schools, it's horrible. They are preparing people for this kind of 9-to-5 life that hasn't existed in maybe 20 years. You know, it certainly doesn't exist anymore. And in the future, it's going to get less and less valuable with the artificial intelligence and algorithms and robotics. And yeah, that's people kind of find some. Yeah, and Bitcoin. So Bitcoin provides, I think Bitcoin is going to carry a lot of people in the future. And we definitely need, like, I really love and applaud Thomas's vision here on World Crypto Network to expand globally. So we could actually have a trustworthy channel to answer like everybody's questions, like 24/7, like for real 24/7. I mean, Max, you're getting pretty close with these videos. Like people in the chat are saying that they can't keep up with the videos, but luckily you can always watch these afterwards, and you know, 1.5x speed up. That's what I do. And yeah, while you're doing that, remember to hit the like button. It really helps us to get the word out. And you know, if you like the stuff, please donate to the World Crypto Network as well.
Absolutely, yes. And Nico, you do have a bat in the background. And why is that? Well, I for sure hope it's not for aggressing against other people, of hitting them with the money and taking away their Bitcoin. That would be horrible of you. But I would applaud you if this is used for self-defense. Because self-defense is not just a thing that is nice, but it is a thing that is your right. If someone is aggressing you, against you, if someone is trying to steal from you, hurt your body, or trying to kill you, you have a right. You should defend yourself in order to preserve your life, liberty, and property. And that is, well, of course, amazing. And I would argue, and maybe we can finish up with this point, is that Bitcoin is a weapon. And it is a weapon that is of immense impact, and it has incredible power. But it is not a weapon that you can use in aggression. It is not a weapon that you can use to hurt others. It is only a weapon that you can use for self-defense. And self-defense is important because your rights are being violated 24/7. It's called the government. They do it all the time. And especially with the banking system. Inflation is theft. It's taxation without a representation. Fractional reserve banking is theft because it is inflation. Know your customer rules are immoral and they exclude billions of people from that system and bring them not prosperity, but the opposite. They destroy wealth. So we are being attacked. We are in a war. We are in financial warfare. And Bitcoin is a weapon. And it's lying just there on the table. And you can use it for self-defense or you can ignore it. But to be honest, I have no idea how you are going to defend yourself from this war that is happening right now, other than with gold, silver, but most importantly, Bitcoin. So Nico, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin being a weapon of self-defense?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely correct. This is not for aggression. This is for self-defense in case somebody wants to come for my node or anything else like that. Like you said, government is not our friend, and we have the right and obligation to defend ourselves and our families for sure. And yeah, I think Bitcoin is a great weapon of self-defense. It's the only weapon of self-defense, and that's what, like we talked earlier with Saifedean as well. For me, the biggest thing about Bitcoin is the freedom and personal responsibility that it allows me, the leverage, the power in the future. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have Bitcoin, you will, in my opinion, you will risk a lot more than by not having Bitcoin, because you gotta protect yourself, you gotta protect your interests and hedge your bets for sure.
Absolutely. Well, hey guys, thank you for joining us. There was a fantastic 45-50-minute video that we did here with the one and only Nico Lamanen from Finland. You can find him at OmniFin on Twitter, and his website, his stuff is up at maximalliberty.com. And guess who's walking up there? It's Regan from The Conscious Resistance. Wave a little bit. Hi there. Great content at The Conscious Resistance. Amazing stuff that they're doing. And also a decentralized starfish organization. So yes, open source entrepreneurship. Isn't that amazing? That's what we talked about. Thank you guys for joining us. Please support the institute that this guy up there founded, Murray Rothbard. Please support the Mises Institute at Mises.org. A plethora of free articles, books, audiobooks, lectures, podcasts, everything on there for free at your taking. So please go there. Maybe thinking about joining the Mises University for next year. That will be something, right? Please, of course, also like and subscribe and hit the bell notification button at the World Crypto Network, not just to get many, many more of the Mises videos, which will come over the next 2 days, but then it's over. So I'm going to stop spamming this channel with all the Mises University stuff. But until then, stay up there and please provide always the comments in the chat. You can also donate to the World Crypto Network so that we can build up more of the amazing World Crypto Network as decentralized as possible. You can find myself on Twitter at HillobrandMax. My personal website is towardsliberty.com/Bitcoin for a library on Bitcoin, /economics for my personal library with reading suggestions on Austrian economics. And I'm also writing a paper on anarchy and money and why we neither need nor want government regulation in Bitcoin. It is, of course, absolutely, why wouldn't it be? It is written in an open source writing process and published under the Creative Commons license, just as it should be. So if you want to support that, go to towardsliberty.com/anarchy, and you can write, comment, edit, anything that you want to do in the Google documents. So, Nico, any last words, and what are your final words on Bitcoin and open source entrepreneurship?
Anarchy and freedom all the way, and open source entrepreneurship, open source everything. Like, why would you hide things? You get much better results by sharing and getting the best minds in the world to work with you.
100% correct. So it's been a pleasure doing this podcast for you with Nico, and join us for the next one, which is going to be somewhere later tonight here at the Mises University. But we finally have some of the original content back. We have the Bitcoin group with Thomas Hunt, with Mad Bitcoins. I do not know who is joining him. I most likely will not, so we'll get a bit of a break of my annoying ass, and you won't have to see my face all the time. But yes, the Bitcoin Group, one of the best shows that we have here in Bitcoin and here on the World Crypto Network. So that is going to be the next video. I think it's at 4 Eastern time or Western time. I'm not entirely sure. It's on the channel. You will find it. So thank you so much for joining us, and see you on the next one. Bye-bye.